Okay, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Professor Ana Maria Peredo, full professor, Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Social and Inclusive Entrepreneurship. Tier 1 is very prestigious in Canada, right? So very well known and distinguished in the field of community organizing, indigenous entrepreneurship and social enterprises. We're very lucky to have her because she's really a leader in this kind of research. And she, as you're going to see, she essentially builds on her extensive experience from her in research in Peru, her home country. She's an associate editor organization, co-coordinator of the European Group for Organization Studies, standing working group on organization studies in Anthropocene, and past president of Western Academy of Management. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, Ana Maria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, bon dia. Bon dia. So it is a pleasure for me. Thank you, Sergio, for such a kind words and for introducing me and for the beautiful, and gracias too for the invitation. It's always a great pleasure to be back in Latin America. I'm Peruvian, you know. So I want to talk a little bit when the commons fade, indigenous knowledge, system change, and the future of collective life. And I want to talk about this because this is a project that is a long-term project and is part of a larger project on colonization, decolonization, and recolonization that include a number of countries. So let me go here. Oh. Okay, so first let me start by honoring indigenous people, acknowledging the Guarani people. We are the traditional custodians of these unceded lands. Their struggles continue. Every indigenous community have a lot of struggles for the land. Always is a struggle for the land. And like leader Carlitos de Oliveira says, here is the struggle for the land. You can read this. Without land, we Indians cannot live. Will the state provide these food baskets to our children in 10 or 20 years? I do not believe so, he said. Without being able to plant something, without guarantee access to our land, always the land, there is no hope for us. That's what the Guarani leader says. All my relations, I'm Peruvian. My maternal mother comes from the northern Peru, Piura. I don't know how many Peruvians are here. It's the Piura area, the northern Peru. There is a community, Tayan community. In the community was announced in the 70s, was built a huge dam. That means that the people were announced that they will have to leave their places. They will be relocated to build this huge land. So I remember as a grandchild, as a little child, going with my mother and going with her at night from her hut and walking through the night of the countryside. And I arrived to my first community meeting and a community assembly. That was the first time I was in a community assembly. In the 70s. And you know what? My mom keeps saying, what did I say? Oh, this is. My grandmother said, how we are going to save our ancestors from drowning? I was surprised because you will think that they will be worried about themselves. They will be worried about themselves. What is going to happen with their lives? Concerned about their ancestors. What is going to happen to their ancestors? How they are going to move their ancestors? And someone else says, they are going to drown our mother river. You see, they were concerned about the ancestors. They were concerned about the river. They were concerned about their lives. So what this Poichos Dam did, what was built for? And what were the consequences? The people were relocated. The whole area was inundated. And why? Because economic growth. Because what they wanted is big, big farmers. What were the consequences? They lost their identity, they lost community, they lost their biodiversity. And this is happening in so many other places. There is tons of literature of people being displaced. Even if now we are talking about freer, impaired, and informed consent, this keeps happening all the time. In the name of economic growth, someone else is being benefited, not indigenous people themselves. They are the sacrifices zones. They are being sacrificed, and that happens all over the place every day. So in this talk, I will talk a little bit about what motivates me. So in March, I came back to Peru for a field trip. And I went to a town, a little town, before I arrived to my village, where I have been involved for many years. And I saw a lot of old people in the streets. This wasn't new, but the intensity and the number really called my attention. And I thought, what is happening in these communities? So that was the motivation for this presentation, seeing these faces, these elder people in the streets. So I will talk a little bit about community-based enterprise, the context and the audience. And then I will talk about the case of culture and the transformations and their consequences from 1997, when I arrived there the first time, to the 2025, the March visit, my last visit. And then I will ask, what are the implications of that shift for all my relations, human, not human, natural worlds, and the social interactions? And then I will present a case too, of First Nations in Vancouver Island, where I live in Canada, where I'm involved since 2009 to 2023. And I will talk a little bit about what makes the difference, what happens, what are these transformations about. So let me talk to you a little bit about the Andean Commons as a form of life. Early on, I talked a little bit about indigenous economies. And I learned a lot from there. In the early 80s, as a student of anthropology, I went to a community, Aymara community in the southern Peru. And I went to study credit systems. That was my thesis about in 1982. But when I arrived there, I won't go into a lot of stories, what happened before, but I learned with the way I was studying about credit systems was very little. Wasn't really what the economy was about. What I learned is that the people have a huge systems and very complex systems of reciprocity and solidarity. And that the economy is embedded in those rituals and ceremonies. Though that is what I learned. So here you have a ceremony of a child, the first haircut of a child. And every member of the community take care of that child. Everyone comes with something for building a fund for the future of that child. So the economic life is embedded in ceremony and ritual. And the same thing with when people marry. It's not a family, it's a community that take care of that. And they are watching, and everyone build a fund for that. So, and the same thing with caring for the land. They use systems of reciprocity called faenas, where everyone goes and take care. They have assemblies where 100 eyes see what's happening in the mountains, in the Guamani, in the Pachamama. And they work together to solve the problems. And so that was the community I lived for 3 years, this Aymara community. Everything I learned was from there. It's why I talk a lot about indigenous economies, because I learned from that. That was the foundation for me. Unfortunately, late in the 80s, 85, we have a guerrilla movement. Because it's huge injustice there in this country. And there was people, one day I was in the community and people say, Ana Maria, you have to leave. We all have to leave. We cannot protect you here. And many people died. Many indigenous people got caught in the middle. The army arrived, killed them. The Chinese arrived, killed them. Some people got enrolled. And of course, this war for the Peruvians, the rest of Peruvians, the Limeños in the city, was a war of the Indians in the mountains until arrived to Lima in 1992. And there was a lot of repression and many people died. And that's where I leave Peru in 1992. So later on, in 1998, 1997, I have the opportunity to go back to Peru. Actually, I came back before. But in 1997, I started looking, and I have the privilege to look about how the communities are reclaiming their indigenous way of life and coming back, because the stories were horrible. People have to live with whatever and fly to the mountains. So here in 1997, they came back to build their communities, to get together. And I have the opportunity to go there and visit all these communities. And they start building the bridges, start building the plazas, and start building their economic life as well. And one of the things that I always talk about is development in their own terms. And that's what the community-based enterprise is about, is development in our own terms. And we hear this in many indigenous communities, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, development in our own ways. That's defined in our own lands. So they got involved in all kinds of things, community mining, factories for pubs, markets, livestock, all kind of different kind of enterprises as a community-based enterprise. And here is an example a little bit of the assemblies in some communities. So what is CBE? CBE is rooted in the indigenous ontologies and as alternative to development. And I'm saying alternative to development because sometimes we think that development is one way. I feel very uncomfortable when people say, you come from a developing country, because I think we have the right to have different ways to development. There's no linear path. There's different ways. There's a pluriverse. And that's what indigenous people around the world are fighting for. Is why it is the war developing our own ways. There is a pluriverse. So what is a ways of enterprising by and for indigenous communities. It's no NGO, it's not the government, it's no one. It's endogenous form of development, rooted in indigenous ontologies, rooted in all this way of solidarity, all these complex ways, and what the understanding of community is, and understanding of economy is. And the community is the entrepreneur. It's not the individuals. And the community as an enterprise organized to create value collectively for community flourishing is holistic and have values of different kinds. And there is a balance. Sometimes people ask me over the years, oh, it's all community, it's no individual. It's a balance. Life, and they understand very well the balance is between individual and collective. It's not one way, it's these balances that they know about. And they have a lot of benefits: food security, job creation, civic democracy, all kinds of benefits. And I always argue that that's a strategy for local sustainability. It's what we call now regeneration. That's what they do. So building in in ethnography of 11 communities in different places, I start looking at what are the conditions, what are the stresses, what triggers them. And there is a lot of different triggers. Social marginalization, because the people are indigenous, lack of economic opportunity, political crisis, all kind of different things, and that's what I have been writing about. There are different set of conditions. There are cultural conditions. And at the center there is indigenous knowledge, solidarity practices, experience of collective action, community orientation, which is fundamental, and I will talk a little bit more because I don't think people have written about that. And community skills is no skills coming from others. They build in what they have. People often say local communities don't have resources. They do have resources. It's about mobilizing their resources. And there is a multiple goals. There is spiritual, is cultural, is political goals, and it's embedded. It's embedded in social cultural structures. And it's a process of local strategy. It's my argument, and there is a transmissibility. Other communities are looking. It's a strategy. And now people have no indigenous communities, and we see lots of people writing about different parts or some parts. There are some names there, Thomas Waber, for example, and they are happening, and lots of success cases. UK, Canada, Germany, New Zealand, Mexico, Brazil, Kenya, Italy, and others. People are writing, students are writing theses, papers on all this, on community-based enterprises. It's growing. The literature from the 2006 is growing. And UK, well, there is a path from the community, and this is going to close. The people come together and own the path, decide to buy it and own it collectively. In Canada, sometimes companies have left and the community is suffering, and people start leaving, the schools start leaving, and so people start building. I know in Alberta, they built a hockey school in order to build collectively, and they own a collect. So we can go all in these different examples. So it's growing. So let me now take you to culture. What happened in culture? The community around markets and culture. As if you have read that, probably you're familiar with culture, but I will tell you what I found in my last field work. And so culture built the largest weekly market in the region, in the region in the Andes. At 5 o'clock in the morning, there is the camiones, the trucks coming. Everyone is coming to this fair that is in the middle of the mountains, 3,400 meters above sea level. The women start coming, all the people. By 7 o'clock, people start having soup. In the meantime, women start preparing to sell their soup, so also women start having their breakfast there. By 8 o'clock, the market is there, full-fledged in the market. And they sell all kinds of things, okay? So culture have a huge problems. Not only the war was a problem, but soil erosion. And they know, and they were in assemblies, and they say, we cannot keep pushing the Mother Earth, our Mama Pacha. We have to take care of her. We really have to do that. So what they did, the young people needed jobs, they needed income. What they are going to do? The land wasn't working. They couldn't just keep exploiting the land. They have to take care of it. They realize they are in a mountain, but they realize that for everything they do, they have to go to the main city. And that means that their products get bad, the meal gets bad, and they have to go in very bad roads to this town. They realize that there were other communities higher than them. And so they say, we are going to build a market so sellers and buyers can come here in this market. And what resources they use? The commons. They own common land, Central Plaza. So they start using their Central Plaza. They divide it in different places and they rent. So when the people come and sell and buy, they rent, they collect money from that. And also they have some resources that was interesting. Not only their Central Plaza, they were well known for the cheese. People in Peru in that area knew that they were the producers of the nice cheese there. So they start building, they have a ferry, they develop fair for livestock. And with that money, they built, Club de Madres built dining center, breakfast, lunches, and they built a botica, a little pharmacy. They built a school. You see the social value, right? So they build all that kind of things. Let me see here. They build all kind of things, and they strengthen the cultural too, because they support the traditions and their dances and everything. So what is behind the community-based enterprise? One thing that is so important, and I really need to write about this, is the community orientation. What is the community orientation? The paper is there. People have not picked it up in the community orientation. The community orientation is the sense, in very simple thing, is the term that you belong to an organism. And if the organism is not healthy, you are not healthy. It's the sense of interdependence. And so then you have, how that work? They have a commoners assembly in this community. And the commoner assemblies, people go there with their chickens, the mother, the children, everyone goes there. And they discuss what's happening in the community. And they have executive body. It's not that everyone take decision together. They have this to discuss, and then they have an executive body. And they have a control council for accountability. And they have a production system, they have meal and cheese centers, they have communal livestock, communal agriculture, that they have land, for example, that are communal, but the people also have their plots. That kind of help with food security. If something goes bad in one place, they have the communal land, right? They have irrigation projects. They have community development. You can see education, health, pharmacy, daycare, dining center, ecology and forestry. But they have this as a community. It's no individual. It's they have. And they mobilize resources. And so they have production and distribution and consumption as a community. It's no business is business, and it's all together. And they mobilize those resources for community flourishing, for the common good. That's what is important, the common good. So, but there is a small business opportunities too. People have their plots, and there is a small, remember, we have to balance the individual and the collective. And so people, the market open opportunities for people repairing their shoes, for little stores where they sell food. For this family, for example, used to go all the way to the main city with their products, their milk got bad. Now they are value added. They are cheese, yogurt, etc. And you have a haircut you can have in the market. You can have everything in the fair market. They have their business, right? I didn't cut my hair there, by the way. Okay, but, and you know, at the end of the day, but you know, the whole process of the market started on Thursday with, you know, killing the animals, preparing the food and everything, preparing the spaces to rent them. By the next day, on Friday, by 4 o'clock, the plaza is clean because everyone brings the chanchos, the pigs, and the plaza is clean. And then life continues until next Thursday. So care for the air beings is what they call nature, is deeply woven into indigenous worldview in the practice and community life. People sometimes say they are not environmentalists, but this is not regarded as a separate environmental issue. It's part of their life. It's part of part of the community orientation, because the community includes the urbeans, include the Pachamama, the mother, everything is included there. So responsibility is shared and carried out through many eyes seeing. That's what they do in the, and there is a sense of enough. There is enough that we can get from the land. You can see that. And there is in the matter, and the work, and the finance, and the work. So this has been life in community. What happened in 22 in the last years? So there are always happening, and in every indigenous community, and I'm sure here too, historical pressures for the land, right? And in Peru, the land belongs to the community. There is a constitutional right to the community. They have, and in the 60s, they got titles. And there is the constitution that you cannot touch indigenous land. So we have a lot of historical pressures. For example, in 1995, there was a law, the Tierras de Comunidades Campesinas, that what happened there is encouraging them to privatize. In 2007, with the government of Garcia, the government start getting frustrated because communities start protesting against mining. Mining and Canadian mining, I have to say. Lots of Canadian mining, a lot of protests about, lots of conflicts. And the president said, these indigenous communities really don't exist. It's just a romantic idea. Furthermore, they get in the way of development. They are the dog in the manger. They don't eat, and they don't eat to eat. They don't allow people to eat. The dog in the manger. El perro del hortelano, he's called it. So you see the pressures coming from the government against the constitutional right. But the community in Cocha, over all these years, and I have seen all the pressures since 1997, continue to keep collective life. They continue. But over the last years, there have been a lot of promotion of individual entrepreneurship. In the schools, the communities now have some money. Many of the young people, like you, they go to study administration, business administration. What do they teach them? Individualism, individual entrepreneurship. And they come and say, we are Indians, we should do things differently. I have heard that for years. And I always thought, no, this is the way to go, right? And individual landholding, offices, everyone that comes from the government or the community, from agriculture, for health or whatever, minister, they tell them, you have to privatize, you have to modernize. That's the best thing. Privatize, privatize. So finally, the community decided to privatize in 2024. And what that means, what are the implications of that? So there is this book, I'm sure you are familiar, some of you, by a Peruvian. The World Bank loves them. Everyone loves him. He's the famous Peruvian from developing countries, telling us that the way to bring capitalism is private property. And he has such an influence, not only in Peru. He has an influence in many, many countries. I'm sure in Brazil too. I'm sure in Canada has to. I have gone to some of his talks, and some indigenous people are listening in Canada. So then we have a whole process of urbanization, looking up, and the municipality. What happened with the weekly market? What is going on with that weekly market? Well, now I'm there in March, is Sunday, and there's a lot of garbage, it's dirty. You remember I told you what happened with the chanchos, the pigs? Well, now it's not the pigs, now it's a little car from the municipality coming, and they are waiting for the municipality to come and clean. Only they are waiting, no one's. So that's one transformation. The other transformation that we see is the weakening of reciprocity on collective labor. Changes like that doesn't happen from one day to another. Those changes don't happen. I have been seeing they are, in fact, interrelated. The social, economic, ecological science are interrelated. And now, over the years, I have seen the families with a lot of shame when it's Faena Day, solidarity, working for the land and working, sending women or sometimes hiring labor with cash. So just because the young people just don't want to participate anymore. The young people just don't want to go and clean the river, pasture care, roads, and so on. They just don't want it, right? And so here is my friend that say, I'm a retired commoner, but I try to help. A retired commoner, there are different kinds of commoners. A retired commoner is supposed to be taken care of. The whole community take care. They don't have to do this faena work. They are being taken care. So you see how we're changing for older people? There is a disruption of ritual and spiritual care for the land. And ritual is what brings people together. Think about, if we go in a moment of silence, we create community. That's what the ritual and ceremony builds community. So the assemblies are more than administrative meetings. They are sites of business, social and ecological planning, and accountability, an assessment. It's all those. It's civic democracy, right? The assemblies are sites of ritual and governance and building community. They realize within the assembly how they are going to do things, when the ritual is going to take place, what the mother earth needs to be taken care of, right? So now, with privatization, there is a decrease of commoners, right? And with the decrease of commoners, there is erosion of the assembly. And with the erosion of the assemblies is the erosion of community, right? An erosion of care for the mother earth. So the other transformation is the dominance. And I'm saying dominance because always having small businesses, individual business, family business. But there was with a different sense. There was a sense of community orientation. But now we have a different thing. It's a dominance. There is ontological chief imbalance. A CV is a collective subject. A small business is an individual subject. So there is a reorientation of care. In CV, care is extends to outwards, to elders, to beings, to stewardship. As private enterprise, gaining dominance, care gradually turning inward toward profit, toward individualism, toward and over profit, over collective good. That's what is happening. And that's why you see so many elders out of the community in the little town and next to the town there. So many. So what are the implications of those transformations for all my relations, human, non-human, natural world, and social interactions? You just imagine. The weakening of reciprocity breaks down social cohesion. And the capacity, this is just example. There are many, many implications. I'm still thinking about all this, right? I'm still trying to make sense of all this. But also diminish the capacity for rapid collective response, because one important aspect of community-based enterprise, having the possibility of collective action, is one of the conditions. With this, they decrease the response for rapid collective response. When something happens, they cannot respond as they did before. It's fragmentation also of the communal land holding. Land is more vulnerable to sell, to rent, or for outsiders. Now, individuals, they are more rude. Together, they were strong. Now, alone, they are vulnerable, and the community is vulnerable. My elder here, Doña Natasha, said to me, Ana Maria, now there is so much pressure to sell our land. People are coming and asking to sell. You see here. there is a whole pressures, right? And there is a disruption of ritual and a spiritual care for the land. There is a weakening of the Pachamama, the Mapus, to each other, the concern for each other, the solidarity is breaking. People don't go into ceremony. So what are the implications of the individual enterprise? Reciprocity is replaced by self-interest. And that's what having there, self-interest now. The responsibility is displaced. The stewardship becomes fragmented. You just take care of your piece of land, of your house, and that's it. And we know that now the land, the 100 eyes that look at the whole land and look what is happening over there up in the mountains, what is happening in that. And everyone say, okay, we need to do something. And they work together, is gone, okay? And there is a generational divide. Youth is socialized into market-oriented values. So now, the retired commoners, some are being displaced. Their houses, they're pressured to sell, and then they're up in the next city selling a little bit, candies or whatever, and they are sick. Some with dementia even. That's the tragic thing. So, beyond, there is more profit or cheese, and one can argue more production, more well, nicer houses. Look at that difference, right? Vehicles, equipment, all that. But there is more than social inequality now. There is a political, social, economic, ecological erosion. There's more than just social inequality. A community economy organized around collective flourishing is being reorganized around sport, because that's the mainstream, there's the sport, remember the story in my family? Accumulation and control by a few. It's 4 families now that collect all the milk, and people are under pressure for the pastures and all the things to produce more and more and more milk. They don't even invite you cheese anymore. They don't eat cheese anymore. The cheese goes to national and international markets. That's development? You wonder. So this is not about rejecting enterprise or progress. It's about asking, what we lose when collective ethics, care, and interdependence are eroded? Community-based enterprise can be a mechanism embedding enterprise in relationships that sustain life. And there are many cases, and I have to say, should I present so many cases that they are successful, many places around the world, or should I tell you what is happening after so many years? And so I have 2 presentations. I decided to go with this one. But it faces challenges. It faces challenges. So let me now talk about another case, okay? Turtle Nation in Canada, addressing colonization, 2009, 2023. I have been involved in these communities in 2009. I have been taking my students, and this is a community that have trouble, real trouble. But they start restoring the ceremony. You can see here with my students restoring the ceremony. And they start talking about, they realize that the young people were going to the big cities. They are not interested in being indigenous. They are interested in different things. So they asked us, the team of us, from my students and I, they asked to do participatory video. And, and why they asked participatory video? That we train the young people in participatory video, because they realize that they have to involve the young people and keep the young people coming to the community and being in the community, at least for some part, right? Right, they're going to Vancouver, that is exciting, and learning about their lives. So the video, the participatory video was done with them, but they had to interview the elders. And then, of course, we all edited the video, and the elders tell stories. And the young people start learning about their culture, right? So that was done there. And every time you go to the community, they show you this, the Douglas Treaty. The community lost a lot of their land. because colonizers give them a document and then say, you sold the land. That's basically it. And they say, we didn't sell it. Well, this is the document that says. So they always tell you about this, especially the elders. Well, this community went through whole process in 2009, the whole process started. They went through visioning processes, visioning together where they want to go. And they developed later the biggest solar panels in the province. They reconnect with the land. They take the children to the land, to the bosque, to the foresta, you say in Portuguese, the foresta. I love that, foresta. The foresta, they take it to the foresta. And they reconnect with the land, with the ways of living within the land. They establish oyster farms and so on. They take the children. They recover the culture, the arts, and they build a whole fair. So they are in this process of decolonization, really. And anyway, let me see. Okay, I'm here. So what makes the difference? What makes a difference? Peru is where I started my life, really, learning from them. And when I came to Canada, I said, there we have the regenerative communities there forever. It's ancient. So what makes the difference? One thing I learned, microenvironment matters. You can go so much. I have so many stories about why it matters, but government policy matters. In Peru, still we see indigenous peoples with the aid and poverty kind of lenses. We are not seeing them as economic actors. And there is a whole push toward economic growth, as you see, and they're ready to be sacrificed. Indigenous people are sacrificed, continue to be sacrificed. In Canada, there are tensions, huge tensions. Things are not perfect. There are huge tensions. But we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, the report, that is making a huge difference. There was a reconciliation process. And there is the United Nations Rights of Indigenous People, and now there's land management. They still are the push, and still we are seeing what is going to happen with the current government toward fossil fuels and so on, and still are sacrificed territories. But there is a huge win there with the Truth and Reconciliation report, and that oblige us to do different things. Now, another factor is institutional and financial support. Peru have this top-down. Collective ownership, they don't even look at. NGOs are not even looked at. NGOs come and say how we help them out. From outside, they don't look at the richness that is there. The policies don't look at the richness is there. In Canada, there are now business programs. Procurement is not perfect. There's a lot of problems now with procurement, but it's there. And there are grants. The people of the community, the First Nation case, they built many of the things that they built in basis of grants. The government give grants. Now they are self-sufficient, but at least they have the seed grants, right? And there is some recognition of distinct economic life. It's still not perfect. Awareness, societal awareness, this is important. In Peru, there is still racial discriminations against indigenous people. In Canada, there are efforts toward reconciliation. There are tensions, but there are more and more efforts toward reconciliation. There is inclusion, but without epistemic transformation. We have no epistemic transformation yet. Education. In Peru, management and business educations continue to privilege. And I think happening in many, it's so good to be in Insper, I have to say, and to hear what I have heard is, because everywhere I go to Latin America business school, I come discouraged. They continue to teach all stuff, individualism, and that's the consequences of what happened in culture. In Canada, there are attempts now for us to include indigenous knowledge and values in business schools. We are working, many of us here, together, right? And there is also awareness in public discourse. Things are not perfect, but we are walking toward that. And we can talk more about that. So system change requires more than new tools or greener strategies. Sure, it's good to have all the tools, all the technology, all that, good. But there is a change that has to happen here. I think the worst the colonization is the colonization of our minds. That's the worst. So it requires the colonizing, how we all think about economy, how we all think about success, and what it means to live well together. And there are signs of hopes. I have been in the museums and I see this art. It's not the colonial, they are transforming the colonial and putting faces of indigenous people with indigenous children. And there are books called Cholos contra el Mundo. And Cholos is a very derogative term that people use for indigenous people migrating into the city and working as a servants. But now they are getting proud and they are getting collectively, they are doing all kinds of things, they are proud. And that's a huge sign. Gracias, obrigado, thank you. Love to hear your questions, love to hear.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. It was amazing because I was already in many countries like Afghanistan. The people are living in an indigenous community, and also in Iran, in Pakistan, in Syria, and in a lot of countries. My question, when we are talking about the beauty of orientation of community, and also we are talking about the culture, how cool, how beautiful it is. And on another hand, we are living in 21st century where we are all connected by cell phone, by technology, by new productions. Don't you see that preserving this community, the culture community, in indigenous way of life, like a primary way of life, where they are exchanging their goods or their materials to live their life? And we can see that one environmental change can impact their life, or maybe this it can be like a problem for their extension. How do you observe keeping them in this indigenous or in this primary life can be useful for them, or it is something unfair toward that community to live in this like primary life, that the life that the people were living in 18th century, not in 21st century? How do you observe that, and what do you think that what should we do if we are going to help them to connect with the technology? Don't you see that we are also will try to destroy their old community, their old culture community? I would like to hear more about your opinion, and how do you see the future of these people, those people that can live by their lands or by their goods? Thank you.
Okay, so when we think about community, we think about this is living economies, right? Doesn't seem that they are not adapting. And now there is, of course, they have cell phones, they have all kinds of things. And people, everywhere in culture, they have their cell phones and all that. So the problem is not that they have to be frozen in time. In fact, no community, indigenous community, is frozen in time. They adapt. Their adaptation to new forms and new ways always is there. Yesterday, for example, we visited a community with Beatriz, and I can see in the ritual that they were talking about, they have got now the guitar and the violin. There's a whole adaptation, right? So the problem is not that to stay there, it's the values, right? You can see, for example, in the second case, they are adapting. They have solar panels, they are adapting technology, but they are bringing back their values. They say, back to the future. It's back to the future. Keeping the values, but thinking in the future. Okay? So we are not talking about staying still. There is no way. But what it is about keeping the values within technology. And I think that's why I chose the second case, to show. And the community was smart to realize that they have to bring the young people to maintain those values. In the case of indigenous community in Canada, they are rescuing it, actually, their values, because they have a whole history. But it's not about staying there. There's no community stay there. It's how we maintain. Okay? James?
Thank you. It was so enriching to listen to you. And I would like to return to an ontological problem that you raised in some of the slides.
Can you put your...
Okay, are you hearing me right now?
My hearing is not very good.
In anthropological theory, we have figures like Felipe Descola, Stambela Stanguers, Maricel de la Cadeia, Eduardo Viveiros de Castro right here in Brazil. So influential with the concept of perspectivismo ameríndio. And I would like to know more examples of how indigenous people, analyzed by you, mobilize categories not merely as empirical classifications or as a point of view, but in a ontological sense, in ways that challenges the oppositions between culture and nature, like the meaning of a river or a specific tree. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring the work of Arturo Escobar, especially the work of Pluri-Universe. And that's very important because, it's very delighted for your question, because over the years having one way to develop, right? And it's why I say I don't like to be called a person that comes from developing countries, because I believe there is a different path, right? And the Brazilians in the development theory have been fundamental. I think Brazilians have been brilliant in the whole discussion about development. So the work of Arturo Escobar brings that. There is a pluriverse, and we can live in a pluriverse, and that's what it is about, right? So when I started writing about this, was the whole thing about globalization, one word, homogenization almost, right? So now what I say with the community-based enterprise is about alternative to development. So it's within that thinking about the pluriverse, the thinking that there is other ways to be, there's another world is possible. And in that is a different ontology. And that's what indigenous ontology's relationship with nature is not separate, it's part of it. It's a different way to see the world, right? And that's what indigenous people are asking. They are asking for the possibility, no integration, but the possibility of being yourself, do it in your own way, right? And that's the fight in Canada, right? In Canada, we have so many policies and so on, but it's about integration. It's not about accepting epistemic transformation, accepting other ways, right? So we are fighting for that as well, right? And so I'm glad that you bring Arturo Escobar and Marisol and Mario Balazer and all of that. So thank you.
Hi, Dr. Ana. I am also from Peru. I really liked your presentation. I am currently working on traditional knowledge related to weather forecasting, especially in indigenous communities. And when I was doing my project, I found out about 500 signals of weather forecasting related to biological indicators. The information was on the internet, but one of the main problems is that it was really scattered. It was in different books, in different websites. It was really hard to interpret all the signals. And among all the sessions that we have on this week, we have learned a lot from indigenous communities, economy, collaboration. But even though we have this valuable information, we still don't use it. So my question is, what do you think is the next step, aside from visibility, to implement traditional knowledge into practice and into public policies?
Okay. Let me talk to you about this. We have to do a lot of work with in Peru, there is such a great knowledge. Permaculture, agroecology. My own mentor, Mario Tapia, I don't know if you have heard his name, Mario Tapia, have been working for 60 years in all these different ways of agroecology and everything in the rural communities. But what we don't have is the legitimacy of that knowledge. That knowledge is denigrated, is not considered, even when people talk about green policies. It's not considered. Many of the green policies in Peru come from the outside. It's kind of environmental imperialism, but without hearing the voices and understanding the knowledge that is there, huge knowledge. So what we need to do is this. This is fantastic. Insper, thank you, right, for doing this, because we need to bring that, and we need to value what we have. Start here. Don't start in the States. Don't start looking outside. Look inside, and we have so much to learn. So one of the things that we do also at international level, in Canada, we have problems too. Everywhere happen. So now what we are doing is we create something called the International Academy Research in Indigenous Management Organization Studies, IRIMOS. So we have been having different meetings with young people, especially doctoral, postdoctoral, young professionals, young assistant professors, to bring that and encourage them. Because everywhere in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, we are hiring now indigenous people because the Truth and Reconciliation in Canada and other places, but they feel alone. And then they say, okay, let's do the ceremony, but then let's talk about business like usual. So now, a group of us, we are organizing these gatherings to encourage the young people to talk about that, to decolonize the knowledge. That's what we need to do. And that means you, everyone have to start bringing that everywhere. So I think we are running out of time, don't we?
Just
One more? Okay.
one question.
Just quick.
So this side, sorry.
Okay.
So I got an opportunity to do my master's at UBC, combining 4 core ingredients: AI, technology, EdTech, and indigenous as well. I like your point that when people marry, there is no family, there is a community, as you have mentioned. So my question is, given your findings on the disappearance of the commons, what is the one intervention, cultural, institutional, or policy based, that you believe has the greatest potential to restore community cohesion in indigenous context as well?
I think for me, having where I am, education, is why I dream about having IRIMOS. And is why in the last 3-4 years I have put my effort toward IRIMOS to support and encourage people to don't be ashamed of being indigenous, to don't be shy, and to speak out. And so, and of course, we'll keep working with the communities, encouraging, supporting, but my field is, my space is education. I think you have different space. I believe that we all, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you is, I want to talk to you as a leaders. All of you are leaders. I was talking to many of you, and I'm amazed the things that you are doing. Many of you are so involved as agents of social change already. We all have the possibility to make change in our own spaces. We all can be agents of change.
Okay. Wonderful conversations. This is so exciting. I love the organizing in their own way. In a sense, it will be the theme of this visit in the afternoon. Let's see if we can make it. But anyway, thank you so much. It's really inspiring. And I hope we continue this conversation, and Insper appears there in the future as a future location, perhaps. I don't know, Carol. So thank you.